Chapter 19. The Shadows. Today, the word itself felt like grit under my eyelids. Sunlight sliced through the blinds with an almost surgical precision this morning, landing harsh and accusatory on my skin. It illuminated the fine tremor that had developed overnight deep within my muscles, a persistent hum beneath the surface, not a shiver from cold, but a vibration born of pure, unadulterated tension. It resonated from my fingertips, down my spine, pooling low in my belly, a thrumming cadence of dread and something else. Something complex, unsettling, that I didn't want to acknowledge. It was ridiculous. Utterly, terrifyingly confusing. I should be consumed solely by the icy grip of fear, the impending doom promised by the Blackmailer's call. That anonymous threat hung over me like a guillotine blade, poised to sever the life I'd fought tooth and nail to rebuild. Freedom, potentially secured by the almost unimaginable sum he was loaning me. Julian, my complicated salvation. His name was a lingering taste on my tongue, metallic and strangely potent. The shadows pooling in the corners of the room, under the worn armchair, behind the drooping fiddle-leaf fig, seemed to coalesce and whisper it. Julian. The sound, even imagined, sent a wave of conflicting emotions through me, gratitude warring with resentment, fear tangled with a bewildering flicker of something akin to hope. It bypassed the pure fear entirely for a sickening moment. I wrapped my arms around myself, the thin cotton of my sleep shirt doing little to ward off the internal chill that battled an encroaching, unfamiliar warmth. Every sound in the old building was amplified, distorted. The groan of pipes in the walls wasn't just plumbing, it was the sound of something tightening, closing in. The creak of the floorboards in the apartment above wasn't just my neighbor pacing, it was the ghost of footsteps outside my door, the felt pressure of Julian's presence, the benefactor, the board member, the man, that now seemed to hover constantly at the edges of my perception. My gaze snagged on the burner phone. It lay face down on the small kitchen table, a slab of dark, silent glass acquired specifically for the Blackmailer's contact. A sentinel. A judge. Its stillness was an affront, a mockery of the frantic pulse beating against my ribs. Each time my mind conjured the imagined buzz of an incoming call on that specific device, a jolt of pure dread shot through me. The "this is it" moment I prayed wouldn't arrive. But then my eyes would drift to my personal cell phone, lying innocently beside it. And now that phone was triggering a different, more confusing jolt. A flutter of hope, or perhaps, disturbingly, longing, for his call on my line. Julian's voice, even laced with that cool, unsettling power he wielded so effortlessly. The power of his wealth, his influence on the company board, the power that had somehow, impossibly, become tangled with my freedom, my career, my very will. I pushed away from the counter, the movement jerky, uncoordinated. My bare feet padded silently across the cool wood floor. Coffee. I needed coffee. The routine, the familiar scent, the warmth. Maybe it could anchor me. The hiss of the espresso machine filled the small kitchen, a counterpoint to the frantic rhythm drumming beneath my skin. Steam curled into the air, momentarily obscuring the stark morning light. Today, the word echoed again, not whispered by shadows this time, but booming in the sudden silence as the machine finished its cycle. Today, the Blackmailer was supposed to call. Today, the payment needed to be ready, facilitated by the loan Julian had arranged, the astronomical sum that felt like both salvation and shackles. It burned a path through my thoughts, a confusing acid bath of overwhelming gratitude, and that other thing. That unsettling awareness, that confusing pull towards him, that clawed at my insides, demanding acknowledgement. An awareness I desperately tried to push down into the deepest recesses of my being, labeling it merely as gratitude for his intervention. But it refused to be ignored. I poured the coffee, my hand still not entirely steady. The rich, dark aroma filled my nostrils, usually a comfort. Now just another layer of sensory input threatening to overwhelm me. I leaned against the counter, sipping the scalding liquid, letting it burn my tongue. a small, sharp pain to focus on, away from the larger, more consuming ache of uncertainty. Maybe he wouldn't call. The blackmailer, I mean. Maybe Julian had somehow intervened. His lawyers, perhaps, had already scared them off. Maybe something had happened. A flicker of desperate hope flared, weak but persistent. Maybe it was over. No. The denial was instant, visceral. This silence felt wrong. It wasn't the silence of resolution, of a threat withdrawn. It felt calculated. A pause designed perhaps by the blackmailer to heighten the tension, to fray the nerves past the point of endurance. And a darker thought slithered in, unwelcome but insistent. Was Julian orchestrating this silence? Pulling strings from the shadows, not just providing the solution, but managing the tempo of my fear, letting me dangle, suspended between terror and that treacherous, burgeoning dependency on him? The money hadn't just bought my potential freedom from the immediate threat, it had bought him something else, a hold over me. A different, more encompassing kind of power that resonated from the bank vaults to the ballet boardroom. My skin prickled. Not entirely from fear. A strange flutter of anticipation traced its way down my spine. The waiting itself was becoming a form of torture. My thoughts kept returning to Julian's confident assurance when he'd offered the loan, his controlled demeanor even when discussing my ruin, the unnerving way his gaze seemed to strip me bare, seeing not just the desperate dancer, but something vulnerable beneath. Something manageable. Stop it. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes, trying to banish the images. His eyes, dark and intense, lingering on my face when he thought I wasn't looking during that tense meeting in his office. The memory alone was enough to send a shiver racking through me. A confusing blend of profound apprehension and something warmer, something dangerously close to attraction, that I refused to name. Was he enjoying this drawn-out tension? The knowledge that I was here, alone, vibrating with a volatile mix of terror and unwilling reliance on him? Did he relish the knowledge of his control over my safety, my career, my increasingly fragile emotional state? The coffee cup rattled slightly as I set it down. The anticipation was a physical thing, a tight, aching knot deep in my core, a desperate, building pressure, seeking resolution. And the terrifying truth was, right now, that need felt less connected to the blackmailer's impending call, and more tangled with the disorienting, terrifying influence Julian represented. The digital clock on the microwave blinked 7:45 a.m. Time to go. Company class started promptly at 8:30, a non-negotiable pillar of the dancer's routine, and today was stacked, fittings, understudy partnering rehearsals, notes, followed by the first tech rehearsal this evening. Part of me welcomed the distraction, the forced focus on the familiar demands of my body and craft. Another part dreaded the long hours of maintaining a facade, interacting with colleagues, smiling through fittings, all while internally bracing for the blackmailer's call on the burner phone tucked deep in my bag, and wrestling with the confusing storm Julian had unleashed within me. It felt like he was holding the precarious strings of my current existence. I forced myself through the motions, pulling on practice clothes, pinning my hair into a severe bun, grabbing my dance bag containing both phones, both sources of acute anxiety. Locking the apartment door felt like stepping into the arena, leaving behind the only private space I had for the relentless exposure of the day. Class was both a refuge and a torment. The familiar commands of Madame Farrell, the relentless rhythm of the piano, the sweat trickling down my back. It was grounding. For moments at a time, I could lose myself in the precision of a plie, the stretch of an arabesque. But the focus required was immense, battling the undercurrent of dread. Every correction felt like a judgment. Every sideways glance from another dancer, a potential accusation. By the time class ended around 10:15, I felt wrung out, yet the day was only beginning. Immediately after, I was due in wardrobe for a refitting for Giselle's Act 1 costume. Standing on the small platform under the compassionate eyes of Martha, she knew something was amiss. The cool slide of the measuring tape against my skin, the sharp prick of pins adjusting the bodice. Usually mundane sensations. Today they felt like tiny violations against my already frayed nerves. I offered polite, distracted smiles, murmured responses about comfort and fit, while my mind raced. Was the burner phone vibrating silently in my bag across the room? Had my personal phone lit up with Julian's name? The urge to check was almost unbearable. "You seem tense today," Martha remarked, her sharp eyes peering over her spectacles as she adjusted the drape of the skirt. "Big rehearsal later?" "Always," I deflected with a tight smile. "Just focusing." The fitting finally ended, releasing me into the controlled chaos of rehearsals resuming in various studios. Today included extensive work on the Act 1 pas de deux with Valentin, who understudies Albrecht. The duet demanded a portrayal of blossoming young love, trust, playful innocence, emotions that felt utterly alien to my current state. Going through the motions with Valentin was excruciating. His grip around my waist felt impersonal, purely functional. The required eye contact, meant to convey adoration, felt like a lie I couldn't sustain. My body knew the steps, the lifts, the catches, but my mind kept straying, comparing Valentin's professional, practiced touch to the memory of Julian's possessive grip in the shadows. Imagining Julian watching, not with a patron's appreciation, but with that intense, personal focus that seemed to bypass the choreography entirely. During a water break, slumped against the mirrored wall, I furtively pulled out my phones. Burner, dark, silent. Personal, dark, silent. The knot in my stomach tightened. The silence wasn't just in my empty apartment. It followed me here, echoing louder amidst the music and chatter. Lunch was a hurried affair around 1:30 p.m. in the company canteen, a salad I barely tasted, surrounded by the easy camaraderie of other dancers discussing steps, complaining about sore muscles, making weekend plans. Their normalcy felt like a reproach. I felt isolated, adrift in my secret sea of fear and complicated gratitude, nodding and smiling automatically while my thoughts circled relentlessly. Julian. The lone. The silence. His power. The confusing warmth his memory ignited. Isabeau. He wouldn't, I told myself fiercely, pushing wilted lettuce around my plate. He wouldn't deliberately prolong this agony. He's protecting me, but the doubt lingered, insidious. Why no word? Not even a brief text. Proceeding as planned. Was his control so absolute he didn't feel the need to reassure? Or was this part of the price? This agonizing uncertainty? It felt like a game, a display of his power, and the most terrifying part was the flicker of unwilling anticipation within me, wondering what his next move would be. 3 p.m. The realization struck me mid-rehearsal, with the understudies for the pas de deux in Act 2. The studio clock showed the time starkly. Hours had passed since the morning's dread began. The entire working day, consumed by this waiting. Still nothing. No call to the burner. No text to my personal phone. Both phones, checked again during breaks, remained dark screens. Full signal bars. Working perfectly. The silence was real. Intentional. Whose intention, though? The Blackmailers? Playing a cruel waiting game? Or Julian's, demonstrating his control over the flow of information, over me? A wave of dizziness washed over me, sharp enough that I swayed slightly, earning a concerned glance from Anya nearby. I steadied myself on the bar. Maybe I should call him. Julian. On his direct line. Find an excuse later. A question about the foundation? Anything. Just to hear his voice. To gauge what? His mood? Whether he was toying with me? The questions were impossible, humiliating, born of desperation. I couldn't reveal this level of unraveling, this dependency. Alam alabol money. Loan. It felt less like salvation now, and more like a gilded cage. Gratitude warred with resentment. His position on the board, his financial lifeline, his unnerving ability to spark that confusing warmth in my chest. It all felt like bars closing in. The simmering awareness low in my belly twisted the knots tighter, an anticipation that felt less like waiting for rescue, and more like bracing for the inevitable cost of his intervention. What would he demand in return for this silence? In dawn, the relentless pace of the day had barely paused. Notes from the afternoon's duet rehearsal had bled into a short break, barely long enough to grab a protein bar and more water before the call for the evening session. The Giselle Act 2 tech rehearsal. 4 p.m. The clock seemed to tick louder now, mocking the hours that had slipped by in agonizing silence from the burner phone. The tech rehearsal. full costumes likely required under the harsh glare of stage lights. Stopping and starting for cues, every movement scrutinized, not just for artistry, but for technical precision in relation to lighting and sound. The irony felt sharper now, after a whole day marinating in anxiety. Tonight, I would embody Giselle, the ghost of a betrayed woman, initiated into the ranks of the vengeful Wireless. Betrayal, desire, vengeance, loss. The themes felt less like a 19th century ballet plot, and more like raw nerves, exposed under the looming threat that had shadowed my every plie, every fitting, every interaction today. My career, the one thing that was solely mine, the thing I'd bled and sacrificed for long before Julian Stonewall's complicated influence fell across my life, depended on nights like these, on nailing this role. It was supposed to be my anchor, my sanity. But heading towards the dressing room now to prepare, the thought of the stage, the lights, the exacting demands of the choreography combined with the technical run-through, felt less like salvation and more like the ultimate exposure. Another stage where my control, already frayed by the day's relentless waiting and the simmering awareness of Julian, felt perilously thin. Yet, what was the alternative? Hiding in a practice studio? Collapsing in the canteen? The churning anxiety was unbearable without focus. The tech rehearsal, daunting as it was a necessary devil. It felt like stepping voluntarily into the spotlight's glare, a desperate attempt to outrun the shadows, even if it meant facing a different kind of fire, fueled by exhaustion, professional pressure, and the inescapable awareness of my precarious situation. Preparing for the tech felt like armoring myself for battle, again. Pulling on fresh tights, lacing point shoes that felt both familiar and punishing after the long day. My limbs were heavy, resistant, fatigue warring with adrenaline. Against what was I truly armoring myself? The critical eye of Maestro Volkov? The technical demands? Or the weight of Julian's potential presence, the knowledge of his power? The confusing pull he exerted even in absentia? I braided my hair tightly, securing stray wisps with fierce determination, needing to control something. Small comfort. Before leaving the relative privacy of the dressing room corner, I checked the phones one last time. Both dark. Both silent. The burner phone went deep into the pocket of my warm-up jacket. A cold weight against my hip. My personal phone followed, a conflicted symbol of potential connection and crushing dependency. Out of sight. Never out of mind. The familiar smell of the theater, dusty velvet, sweat, rosin, old wood, enveloped me as I walked the corridors towards the stage. It was less a comforting perfume now, and more the scent of the arena. The backstage area buzzed with the focused energy preceding a tech run, different from a regular rehearsal's hum. Technicians conferred in headsets, dancers stretched in tense silence or murmured quiet concerns about cues. Costumes were given final adjustments. Familiar, yet heightened. Chaos. Elena, ready for the mad scene on repeat? I turned. Edith Petrova stood nearby, already stretching, her usual polished gaze softened slightly with shared understanding of tech rehearsal torture. She wasn't questioning my timing, just acknowledging the potential ordeal ahead. As I'll ever be, I replied, managing a weak smile. Edith nodded, her eyes lingering on my face for a moment. You look wiped. Rough day? Aren't they all? I deflected, turning away to find a space at the portable bars set up in the wings for warm-ups. Was it that obvious? Did the day's dread and the illicit turmoil paint themselves so clearly on my features? Tell me about it, sighed May, meticulously adjusting her point shoe ribbons nearby. Heard they're having trouble with the trapdoor lift again. Bet we run that cue 10 times. Stand by, please. Act 1 opening sequence imminent. Dancers to places. The stage manager's voice boomed over the backstage speakers, cutting through the murmurs, galvanizing everyone into their starting positions for the top of Act 1. The tech run was about to begin. My heart gave a nervous leap. Showtime. Or tech rehearsal time, at least. The demanding precision required felt like another trial by fire after the long day. I quickly pulled on the romantic tutu practice skirt required for the run, the ethereal white fabric feeling flimsy, inadequate. A barrier against what, exactly? The critical eyes of Maestro Volkov? The demanding steps and technical cues? or the conflicted awareness of Julian Stonewall that seemed to charge the air whenever my mind strayed towards him. My savior, my potential downfall, the man whose influence touched everything, including my position here? I took my place, lining up in the dimness of the wings. I caught the cool, appraising glance of Veronica, her ambition a palpable force even in stillness. Another pair of eyes watching. The stage beyond was bathed in the warm, golden light of a harvest morning. Rustic cottages, Giselle's humble home on one side, Albrecht's disguised dwelling opposite, framed a cheerful village square, adorned with colorful ribbons and vine-covered trellises. Picturesque, idyllic, a scene of innocent peasant life. And tonight, under the weight of my own complicated reality, it felt profoundly unsettling. Maestro Volkov clapped his hands sharply from the edge of the stage, near the tech table, his severe posture radiating impatience. Positions. Let us not waste the precious light, Act 1 opening. Let's establish this village vibrancy immediately. Peasants. He scanned the corps de ballet assembling in the warm light. Feel the sun, the harvest, crispness in the footwork, joy in the expression, no lethargy. From the very beginning, Antoine, dancing Hilarion today, entered, establishing his character as the devoted, slightly overlooked gamekeeper. His earnestness felt poignant, almost foolish in its sincerity compared to the complex deceptions I felt tangled in. As I waited for Giselle's entrance, the anticipation on stage felt manufactured. How could I embody simple village life when my own felt so fractured? My own internal conflict felt far more dangerous, far more real than any stage drama. The pianist, hidden in the orchestra pit darkness, began my entrance theme. Giselle's signature melody, light, airy, full of a youthful promise I felt galaxies away from embodying. Taking a deep breath in the staged doorway of the cottage, I emerged onto the brightly lit village square. I forced lightness into my first hesitant steps, embodying the shyness Giselle feels before bursting forth with innocent excitement. Then, launching into the iconic solo sequence, quick, buoyant hops en pointe, joyful reverences. I projected a radiance that felt like a costume lighter than any tool. My body knew the steps intimately. Muscle memory propelled my limbs through the familiar patterns. But tonight, the movements felt hollow, disconnected. Usually, I find a simple pleasure in solo work. Tonight, I felt hyper-aware of my own body. The stretch of muscle, the burn in my thighs from the day's work, the slight dampness forming on my skin beneath my practice clothes, and acutely aware of the absence of something solid, something that felt real amidst the forced smiles and the turmoil within me. Later, during the Act 1 pas de deux, dancing opposite Henry, whose Albrecht was full of charming, roguish confidence, felt like navigating a minefield. The choreography demanded innocent trust, burgeoning love, playful tenderness. Giselle utterly captivated by the peasant loys. I executed the steps, the shy acceptances, the shared balances where Giselle yields her weight to him, the famous sequence plucking daisy petals, testing his love, feeling like a fraud. Each touch from Henry, professional and correct, felt miles away from the dangerous, complicated awareness Julian evoked. How could I portray Giselle's naive devotion when my own feelings were such a tangled mess of gratitude, fear, and this confusing pull towards a man whose generosity felt like a carefully constructed cage? Deception. It pulsed beneath the romantic swells of the music, embodied by Albrecht's disguise, his hidden noble life. It echoed in my own stomach. Was Julian deceiving me with unspoken expectations tied to his loan? Or was I deceiving myself, interpreting his controlled power as something potentially more? The sweetness of the choreography felt laced with the bitter taste of my own reality. Henry's Albrecht swore his love with convincing ardor, and I had to mirror Giselle's melting acceptance. My own feelings felt tangled, ugly. Not the pure, trusting love Giselle poured into Lois, but a dark, confusing knot of overwhelming gratitude for Julian's salvation, fear of his influence over my career, resentment of my dependency, and this undeniable, bewildering fascination. Elena! Maestro Volkov's sharp voice cut through the tenderness of the music. Connect with Albrecht. You look like you are analyzing his technique, not falling in love. believe it. Where is the vulnerability? The joy? I snapped back, forcing warmth into my eyes, a softer curve to my arms as Henry lifted me. I tried to channel Giselle's yielding trust, pouring every ounce of concentration into the character. But it felt forced. A performance, layered upon a performance. My mind kept replaying fragments of interactions with Julian, the intense focus in his eyes across his desk when he'd agreed to the loan, the low timbre of his voice making the offer, the controlled confidence that had both reassured and intimidated me. Moments that had created this terrifying dependency, yes, but had also sparked an unsettling current beneath the surface. An awareness I felt echoing now, trying to project innocence while feeling anything but. After the pas de deux, the rehearsal moved into Giselle's famous solo variation, a test of technique and stamina demanding sparkling footwork and seemingly effortless grace. I threw myself into the hops en pointe, the delicate battery, the spinning turns, welcoming the physical exertion, hoping to sweat out the turmoil inside. The steps were demanding, intricate. A moment's lapse in focus meant failure. It required a different kind of control, purely physical, that felt blessedly straightforward compared to the emotional chaos within. Why him? The question screamed silently between pirouettes. Why did Julian occupy so much space in my head? Was it just the debt? The power he held? Or was it something else, something I was terrified to name? The variation demanded lightness, joy. But as I danced, all I could seem to focus on was the dangerous influence Julian represented, the web he was spinning around me, made of money and power, and this confusing, nascent attraction. The rehearsal wasn't an escape, it was a torment. A mirror, reflecting the war within myself. Each sparkling step, each required smile, felt like a lie, masking the chaotic, desperate confusion that swirled within me. The music swelled, driving us towards the arrival of the hunting party. Another complex scene involving the core, principles, and crucial plot points. My lungs burned, sweat trickled down my temples, pasting strands of escaped hair to my skin. The physical exertion was immense, yet the internal tension remained coiled tight, untouched. Positions for the hunt entrance, Volkov called out, clapping rhythmically, his demanding presence pushing us harder. Core, remember your spacing. React to the nobles. Elena, Giselle is naive, charmed by Batilde, not suspicious. Show the innocence. I pushed harder, focusing on the character beats, the mime, the interaction. Smile at Batilde. Accept the necklace graciously. Convey Giselle's simple delight, unaware of the impending catastrophe. The world narrowed to the feel of the floor beneath my point shoes, the regal music signaling the noble's arrival, the need to act convincingly. For a moment, blessed relief. Just the role. But then, during a brief pause, while Volkov conferred with the lighting technicians about the hunter's entrance cue, my gaze flickered towards the dark expanse of the empty theater seats beyond the stage lights. A flicker of movement in the shadows. My breath hitched, my blood ran cold, then instantly hot with conflicted awareness. Was someone watching? Was he here? Julian. Observing the company? Observing me? Oh. My eyes strained against the glare, trying to pierce the gloom. Nothing. Just empty velvet seats, rows upon rows of them. An illusion born of exhaustion, frayed nerves, and the constant hum of his presence in my thoughts. But the possibility, however remote, sent a fresh jolt through my system. The thought of Julian watching me now, in this state, physically spent from a long day, emotionally unraveling, performing Giselle's tragic journey towards betrayal, while grappling with my confusing dependency on him. It was mortifying. And strangely, terrifyingly focusing. The music surged again, signaling the continuation of the scene, Batilde's questioning, the growing tension. But something had shifted within me. The idea of being watched by him charged the air around me. My portrayal of Giselle took on a new edge, perhaps a touch too fragile, imbued with a desperate energy that had little to do with the peasant girl's naive charm, and everything to do with the chaotic pulse inside me. Was I dancing for Maestro Volkov's approval, for the art form itself, or was I somehow performing for him, a frantic, unspoken display of the talent he held partial sway over? A plea for him to see past the dancer to the person crumbling beneath? A defiant assertion of something? I didn't know. I only knew that the idea of his gaze felt heavier, more real, than the stage lights beating down on me. The tech rehearsal continued, relentless, with stops and starts for lighting adjustments and sound cues, meticulously working through Act One's dramatic build towards the mad scene. Scene after scene. My body screamed for rest, but my mind raced, trapped in its loop of fear and confused dependency. The theater, once a joyous place, now felt like a cage with mirrored walls, forcing me to confront the conflicting feelings warring within me. The simple rehearsal tutu felt less like a character piece, and more like flimsy armor, failing to protect me from the insidious confusion Julian's influence stoked. The waiting hadn't ended. It had simply followed me here, weaving itself into the music, the steps, the very air I breathed. The dread remained, a cold counterpoint to the unwelcome warmth his thought provoked, a duet playing out in the theater of my soul, and the silence from the burner phone stretched on, amplifying the noise within. Kazi? And there, in the shadows, I saw him. It couldn't be Korai. But it was Kazi 4 hour. He was there. Not just a flicker of movement this time. A solid presence, seated several rows back in the center orchestra section, partially obscured by the shadows pooling between the empty seats. Julian. I couldn't make out his features clearly in the gloom, shielded as I was by the blinding stage lights, but I didn't need to. I felt his presence like a sudden change in barometric pressure, a low, resonant hum beneath the music, tuning my body to a frequency I both craved and feared. My breath caught, a tiny snag in the joyful sequence I was performing. I forced my focus back to the stage, back to the innocent radiance I was willing myself to exude. But the awareness of him remained, a palpable weight on my skin. It was as if his gaze wasn't merely watching the performance, but physically touching me. I felt it trace the line of my neck as I turned, sweep down my back in the simple peasant bodice, linger on my feet as I executed the quick, demanding berets. There was a heat radiating from the darkness where he sat, a perceived intensity in his stillness that had absolutely nothing to do with ballet appreciation. It warred with the naive sweetness I was supposed to project, igniting a traitorous warmth low in my belly. The tremor I'd felt earlier returned, subtler now, masked by the exertion of the dance, but undeniably present. A vibration of nerves, yes, but also confused anticipation. He wasn't just seeing Giselle, the trusting peasant girl. He was seeing me. Elena, the woman beneath the performance, the woman grappling with fear, gratitude for his loan, and the disorienting pull towards the man who held so much power over her future. And the way he watched, it felt like he knew it. All of it. It made my skin flush, and my pulse hammer against my ribs, a disturbing, exhilarating liveness spreading through my veins. Dancing Giselle's mad scene under that gaze became a strange form of torture and terrifying release. Every movement felt heightened, freighted with unintended meaning. As I moved through the shattering choreography, fragmented memories of happier steps dissolving into gestures of anguish, wild, desperate turns spiraling into near collapses, the frantic mime of heartbreak and unraveling sanity. My precision warred with the raw emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Performing Giselle's devastating breakdown, channeling her descent into madness while Julian watched, felt dangerously close to exposing my own fragile state. I needed immense discipline to control the technical aspects of the portrayal, yet part of me felt a desperate, reckless urge to let my own internal chaos fuel the performance. I couldn't escape the feeling that my body was betraying me, responding to his unseen scrutiny in ways I couldn't consciously command. Did the anguish etched on my face look authentic, pulled from the depths of Giselle's betrayal? Or did it merely reflect the abyss threatening to swallow me whole? Did the wild, uncontrolled quality of my movements betray the frantic panic raging inside? The fabric of my clothes felt soaked with sweat, clinging then pulling abrasively against my skin as I stumbled through the choreography of Giselle's unraveling. The warm stage lights, once representing cheerful village life, now felt like interrogators' lamps, stripping away sanity, exposing the raw nerve of betrayal under his unwavering attention. This wasn't Giselle's innocent joy anymore. This was her world shattering, and it felt terrifyingly close to my own. I moved through the fragmented memories, Giselle recalls. A snatch of the happy dance with Lois, the phantom gesture of plucking daisy petals, each movement distorted, broken by grief. My eyes frantically searched the faces on stage. Henry's horrified Albrecht, Antoine's pitying Hilarion, the confused villagers, the aloof nobles, including Albrecht's fiancée Bathilde. I was supposed to be lost in Giselle's madness, but a terrifying part of my awareness remained anchored to that dark figure, seated rows back in the auditorium. Julian. What did he see? Did he see Giselle's tragic descent? Or did he see me, Elena, performing a vulnerability that mirrored my own precarious situation? Did this raw display of emotional disintegration satisfy some part of his need for control? Or did it, perhaps, reveal a strength he hadn't anticipated? The thought sent conflicting waves of fear and a strange, defiant energy curling through me, fueling the wildness in my eyes, the desperation in my movements. The choreography called for Giselle to snatch Albrecht's sword, a physical manifestation of the betrayal. Clutching the prop felt grounding and terrifying. The cool metal against my palm a stark contrast to the burning turmoil inside. I spun, lost in a vortex of grief, the carefully rehearsed steps dissolving into something that felt dangerously real. My breath came in ragged sobs, tears blurring my vision. Were they Giselle's or my own? The music swelled, discordant, mirroring the shattering of Giselle's mind. I staggered across the stage, reaching out, pleading, only to recoil from imagined blows. The physical exertion was immense, fueled now by sheer emotional adrenaline. Every nerve screamed. My body, pushed to its limits all day, responded on instinct, carrying me through the demanding sequence even as my mind threatened to splinter, caught between Giselle's tragedy and my own silent dread. I collapsed, as the choreography dictated, Giselle's weak heart finally giving out under the unbearable weight of betrayal. Lying there on the stage, breath tearing through my lungs, the feigned death felt like a desperate wish for oblivion. The silence stretching from the burner phone, the weight of Julian's salvation and the power it gave him, the fear of exposure, it all pressed down, blurring into Giselle's final, tragic moment. The final chords faded, a tableau of shock and sorrow held on stage. The stage lights remained, pinning me in the stage death. Hold! Maestro Volkov's voice finally cut through the heavy silence, sharp, but perhaps with a fraction less impatience than usual. Excellent energy. We'll break there. Long break for the act change, everyone. Let's say back on stage, ready for Act 2 in 25 minutes. The spell shattered. Dancers sagged, breaking formation, heading towards the wings for water bottles and towels. The sudden release of tension left me feeling shaky, exposed. I automatically moved towards the shadowed haven of the stage left wing, needing a moment away from the glare, away from the center stage where I felt pinned by that unseen gaze. My heart was still hammering, not just from the dancing, but from the unnerving awareness of Julian. Had he seen my struggle? My loss of focus? Or worse, had he seen the unwanted response his presence provoked? Nasavtur. I reached for my water bottle, hidden behind a stack of dusty flats, my hand trembling slightly. The relative darkness of the wings felt like a necessary shield, a place to retreat for a moment from the noise and bustle that inevitably accompanied a major scene change. Even during tech, stagehands were already moving flats for the forest setting. Faint shouts and the rumble of scenery echoed from the stage. You danced Giselle with surprising passion today, Elena. The voice was low, pitched just for me, startlingly close over the backstage sounds. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. Julian. He stood just feet away, melting out of the deeper shadows near the fly ropes, seemingly unconcerned by the activity on stage filtering into the wings. How had he navigated the backstage area so easily? He wasn't in his seat anymore. He was here. Close enough for me to see the faint stubble darkening his jaw, the way the dim work light caught the sharp planes of his face. Close enough to feel the intensity radiating from him, a tangible force cutting through the relative chaos of the break. His eyes, dark and intense, held mine. There was no casual patronage in them now, no pretense of simply being an interested board member observing the process. This was the gaze I had felt from the auditorium, magnified, focused, purposeful. My voice failed me for a moment. I cleared my throat, acutely aware of my clothes clinging with sweat. Maestro Volkov expects passion. A faint smile touched his lips, a knowing curve. Indeed, but there's passion, and then there's fire. You seem to be battling something more than just Giselle's tragedy tonight. His proximity was overwhelming. He hadn't moved closer, but the space between us felt charged, vibrating with an energy that sucked the air from my lungs. My eyes flickered nervously towards the stage opening, where technicians and stagehands were clearly visible beginning the set change for Act 2. Their voices and the clatter carried into the wings. We were hidden, but the risk of discovery felt significantly higher during this extended break, with more people potentially moving through the area. The danger only heightened the tension. "I'm focused on the role," I said, aiming for cool dismissal, but my voice wavered slightly. He took a step closer, seemingly unfazed by the potential interruption. The scent of expensive cologne, sandalwood, and something darker, muskier, reached me. It was the scent from his car, instantly recognizable, instantly destabilizing. "Are you?" he murmured, his gaze intense, searching my face as if looking for cracks in my composure. After a deliberate pause, his voice dropped even lower, a rough velvet whisper that sliced through the background noise, sending shivers down my spine. "Your blackmailer hasn't called." It wasn't a question. Relief washed over me, swift and potent, immediately tangled with suspicion. He'd chosen this moment, amidst the relative commotion of the scene change, to bring this up. "No," I managed, my throat tight. Silence. "Good." He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine, holding me captive despite the activity nearby. "Leave the silence to me." The words hung there, heavy with implication. Control. He was handling it. He was in control. The relief warred with resentment, with the terrifying awareness of my dependency. And beneath it all, that treacherous, insistent feeling of connection. His hand lifted, hovering near my arm but not quite touching. The potential contact hung between us, charged and dangerous in the semi-public space. "Focus on your dance, Elena," he murmured, his eyes holding a silent promise. "Or threat. Focus on the fire." His gaze held mine for another charged second. He lifted my hand, pressing a brief kiss to my knuckles. The same startlingly intimate gesture from the night before, after our day together, performed now with audacious calm in the backstage shadows. The familiar touch sent a confusing wave of warmth and unease through me. Then, as silently and smoothly as he had appeared, he withdrew back into the deeper shadows, melting away towards an exit before anyone moving scenery or checking props seemed to notice him. I stood frozen, my knuckles still feeling the faint, surprising pressure where his lips had briefly touched them. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My legs felt weak, unsteady. The brief encounter, lasting perhaps only a minute or two despite the longer break, had completely undone me. The air still crackled with his presence, his scent lingered, that swift, almost dismissive kiss felt strangely possessive, his words burned in my mind. "Focus on the fire." What fire? The fire required to embody Giselle's spectral sorrow. The ethereal chill and profound forgiveness demanded of her ghost in Act 2, that I now had 15 minutes to prepare for? Or the entirely different, dangerous fire he so effortlessly ignited within me with just a look, a touch, that startlingly brief pressure of lips against my hand? The one that felt dangerously close to consuming me whole as I prepared to transform into a ghost for the moonlit stage? I took a shaky breath, grabbing my water bottle and taking a long gulp of cool liquid, trying to douse the confusion threatening to rage out of control inside me. It didn't work. The water did nothing to quench the heat spreading through my veins, the terrifying awareness of the man who had just marked me with his words in the shadows. 15 minutes. 15 minutes, to banish the lingering memory of Julian's touch and the unnerving intensity of his gaze, replacing it with the profound sorrow and chilling forgiveness of Giselle's ghost. Impossible, but I had no choice. My career, my carefully constructed facade of professionalism, demanded it. I forced myself to move, my legs still shaky, my mind reeling, towards a slightly quieter corner near the designated quick change area during the extended break. My stomach churned with anxiety, but logic dictated I needed fuel for Act 2. I rummaged in my dance bag, pulling out a half-squashed protein bar, and leaned against a costume rack, peeling back the wrapper with unsteady fingers. I'd just taken a bite when Martha bustled over, the gossamer layers of the white Wiley costume already draped over her arm. "Right then, Elena," she said briskly, her sharp eyes doing a quick, professional scan that seemed to take in my pallor even as she focused on her task. "Quick change now. Maestro Volkov is insistent. He wants to see all you wireless in the Act 2 costumes under the stage lights for this next run. Check how the fabric moves during the entrance." I quickly swallowed the mouthful of protein bar, the dense energy bar suddenly feeling like sawdust, and shoved the rest back into my bag, abandoning the attempt at refueling. Martha, usually a source of quiet reassurance but whose sharp eyes seemed to miss nothing today, immediately began the change under her efficient hands. She stripped off my rehearsal clothes, then pulled the ethereal white Wiley costume up my body, the thin, cool fabric clinging to my sweat-dampened skin like a second, fragile layer of vulnerability. As Martha expertly adjusted the delicate skirt and checked the fastenings at my back, her gaze lingered on my face, reflected in the portable mirror nearby. "You look a little flushed," she commented, her tone carefully neutral, though her eyes held a hint of probing curiosity. "Long break catch you off guard?" Her scrutiny, however professionally veiled, made my skin prickle. Usually a comfort, Martha now felt like another pair of eyes assessing my cracks. "Just focusing," I managed, the word feeling thin, inadequate. I turned slightly, pretending to check the fit myself, avoiding her direct gaze in the mirror. There was no way to explain the whirlwind of emotions Julian's brief visit had unleashed, the confusing mix of fear, dependence, and that bewildering warmth that threatened to unravel me right here in the wings. Backstage buzzed with a different kind of energy now, a subdued urgency. The set change was complete. The colorful cottages replaced by the spectral forest, bathed in cool blue and white light. The air felt heavy with the impending tragedy of Act 2. Dancers moved with a quiet intensity, stretching, adjusting costumes, running through difficult passages with whispered concentration. Veronica, already transformed into the imperious Mirtha, queen of the Wileys, stalked past, her gaze cool and assessing. Arrival, a reminder of the ambition that simmered beneath the surface of this world, and a woman who never seemed to wrestle with the kind of turmoil consuming me. Her poise felt like a rebuke, a silent judgment. How could I embody Giselle's ethereal sorrow, her forgiveness that transcended even death, when my own heart felt like a battleground? How could I move with the required lightness and grace, when my body felt weighted down by this secret, this dangerous entanglement with Julian? How could I dance a tragedy when I felt so close to living one? I took a deep breath, trying to summon the chill of the forest, the weight of Giselle's grief. I forced myself to see the stage not as a place of exposure, but as a refuge. A world where I could lose myself in the steps, in the music, in the story. Walking back towards the wings felt like wading through electrified air. The other dancers' chatter seemed distant, unreal. My world had narrowed to the memory of Julian's proximity, his voice, his intense gaze, and the terrifying realization that the dread of the Blackmailer was rapidly being eclipsed by the far more complex, far more dangerous pull towards Julian. The silence he commanded felt less like a reprieve and more like a tightening leash. The run-through of Act 2 passed in a blur of heightened sensation. Every step, every pose, every interaction on stage felt different now, charged with the residue of that stolen moment. When Henry, as Albrecht, reached for me in a desperate plea, his touch felt clumsy, intrusive, wrong. My body recoiled instinctively, seeking the memory of a different, more potent presence. Maestro Volkov, sensing the shift in energy perhaps, called out fewer corrections. Or maybe I was simply beyond hearing them, lost in the internal storm. The music washed over me, the haunting melodies weaving themselves around the memory of Julian's low voice, his possessive gaze. Focus on the fire. The fire Julian had ignited within me burned, low and insistent. It warred with the spectral sorrow and ethereal chill I needed to embody as Giselle. This wasn't just acting anymore. Giselle's own conflict. The pull of the Wireless's vengeance, versus her undying love for Albrecht, the man who betrayed her, felt terrifyingly close to my own conflicted heart. The need for control over my performance, the impulse towards a forgiveness that felt alien given my situation with Julian, the seductive pull of his dangerous presence. It was all there, swirling within me, demanding expression through Giselle's ghostly form. My mind flashed back to the feel of his lips on mine and his hands on my body, the passion we shared under the street lamps in front of my building. I felt myself flushing under the cool blue stage lights, a deep, betraying heat rising from my chest to my face. My breathing grew shallow as I tried to maintain the character's ethereal grace, the floating quality of a spirit. The thin, wily costume felt simultaneously too revealing and not revealing enough, trapping the heat against my skin, amplifying the sensations. I wanted to tear it off, to run, to hide from his gaze. And yet, another part of me, a darker, more desperate part, wanted Julian to see. To see the effect he had reflected in Giselle's torment. To see the fire he spoke of, threatening to burn away my control, even as I danced the role of a heartbroken ghost. As the Act 2 finale reached its crescendo, Albrecht desperately trying to survive the Wireless's fury, Giselle dancing with him, shielding him with her love until the first light of dawn offered salvation. I felt utterly drained, yet strangely wired. Giselle's final moments, fading back towards her grave, as Albrecht is spared, required a poignant acceptance, a sorrowful farewell. But the final pose, perhaps reaching towards Albrecht one last time before sinking away, felt like a lie. Inside, I was anything but accepting or fading. I was vibrating, alight with a confusing mix of fear, relief that the ordeal of the performance under his gaze was ending, and that raw, unacknowledged need his presence stoked. The lights faded on the final tableau. Applause, sparse but polite, came from Maestro Volkov, Madame Farrell, and the few observers' artistic staff Julian, out front. The tech rehearsal for Act 2 was over, at least for now. Dancers immediately broke character, stretching aching limbs, grabbing towels abandoned in the wings. The usual post-rehearsal buzz filled the air, tinged with the exhaustion of a long tech day, as most headed for the main dressing rooms. Having already shed the ethereal, wily costume in the frantic efficiency of the designated quick-change area just off stage, I felt detached, pulling my worn warm-ups on over my damp leotard with numb fingers. My body moved automatically through the familiar end-of-rehearsal routine. I gathered my scattered belongings, shoving water bottles, discarded layers, and point shoes into my dance bag, slinging it heavily over my shoulder. As I walked, joining the flow of dancers heading towards the corridor leading away from the wings, my mind was a chaotic whirl, trying to process the intensity of dancing Giselle under Julian's gaze, the continued, unnerving silence from the burner phone, and the undeniable fact of his presence watching me tonight. He was waiting. Not in the deep shadows this time, but standing near the edge of the wing, partially illuminated by the dim work lights that had come up. He leaned against a tall piece of scenery, arms crossed, watching me approach. Waiting for me. There was no pretense now. My steps faltered. Turning back towards the dispersing dancers felt cowardly, impossible. Walking towards him felt like stepping willingly into the heart of the storm. I stopped a few feet away, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The sounds of the other dancers faded into a background hum. "Impressive," he said, his voice a low murmur that cut through the surrounding noise. His eyes scanned me, lingering on my face, perhaps noting the lingering traces of Giselle's performed anguish. "You truly embody her." "Embody who?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, still caught between my role and reality. "Giselle?" A slow smile spread across his face, unsettling in its perception. "The woman haunted by a love that undoes her, but I saw flashes of fire beneath the sorrow tonight, Elena." He pushed away from the scenery, closing the small distance between us. I held my ground, refusing to retreat, even as every instinct screamed at me to flee. He stopped inches away, close enough for me to feel the intensity radiating from him, close enough to see the dark flecks in his irises. The silence holds, he said softly. As promised. Thank you, I whispered, the words feeling inadequate, sticky with unspoken complexities. Gratitude for his help with the blackmailer felt like a dangerous trap in itself. Gratitude isn't necessary, Elena, he murmured, his gaze unwavering. Consider the loan. An investment. An investment. The word hung there, cold and sharp. An investment in what? My career? Overseen by him as a board member? My freedom? Or me? The implication sent a chill down my spine, immediately followed by a treacherous wave of warmth. What do you want, Julian? The question tore from me, raw and vulnerable. His eyes darkened, the intensity I'd sensed earlier now starkly visible. Isn't it obvious? The electricity between us was palpable, charged with unspoken intent. I could feel myself drawn to him, despite every rational warning bell clanging in my mind regarding his power and my dependency. Someone will see, I breathed, the protest weak, half-hearted, glancing towards the stage where crew were still working. Let them, he murmured, his voice low and commanding. You felt it too, didn't you? On stage. You weren't just dancing for Volkov. His words struck with devastating accuracy, laying bare the truth I'd been trying to deny even to myself. I felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. This, I gasped, trying to find the words, trying to fight the fog descending on my brain. This is because of the money, the loan, because you helped me with him. I couldn't bring myself to say, blackmailer. He chuckled, a low, rough sound that vibrated through the space between us. The money is handling the blackmailer, Elena. It didn't buy this. His eyes held mine, challenging, intense. This connection started before any calls were made, before any threats surfaced, before even Nocturne. Didn't it? The memory of that night hung between us, thick with consequence for us, entirely separate from the external threat that had forced my hand. The shift in power between us. The spark ignited in darkness. He was making it clear. The blackmail was one thing, resolved by his resources. This tension between them was entirely another, rooted in their personal history. The air between us crackled with possibility and danger. I felt paralyzed by indecision, by the war between rational fear of his influence and this irrational, confusing awareness of him. Rehearsal's over, he said, his voice rough with restraint, acknowledging the dispersing crowd and the end of the official schedule. But ours is just beginning. He stepped back, straightening his posture, smoothing his expression back to cool neutrality. He gave me one last lingering look, his eyes sweeping over me, a look that promised more, much more. Then, he turned and disappeared back towards the front of the house, melting into the shadowed architecture as if he were just another phantom of the opera house, leaving me trembling, reeling. My back pressed against the rough canvas of the scenery flat, the only solid thing in a world suddenly tilted on its axis. My body vibrated as if struck, every nerve ending alive and screaming. The thin fabric of my costume felt marked where his eyes had lingered, leaving invisible imprints of his attention. A choked sob escaped me, quickly muffled against my hand. This wasn't just desire. It was a dangerous connection that threatened everything. He hadn't just looked at me, he had branded me, marked me as his in the shadows of my world. The control he wielded, over the blackmailer, over my future, over the crushing debt I owed him, now extended to this terrifying, intimate territory. He knew it, and the triumphant glint in his eyes as he pulled away told me he savored it. The sounds of the backstage area slowly filtered back in, chatter, footsteps, the clang of a dropped weight from the fly floor above. It all sounded distant, muffled, as if happening in another reality. My reality had narrowed to the pounding of blood in my ears, the lingering scent of Julian's cologne in the air, the chaotic swirl of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. I pushed away from the scenery, my legs shaky. I needed to get out of here, away from the echoes of his presence, away from the scene of this charged encounter. But where could I go? He was everywhere now, in the silence from the blackmailer, in the air I breathed under my skin. Elena, you okay? Gwen's voice, sharp with concern, cut through my daze. She stood a few feet away, watching me, her practice bag slung over her shoulder. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Or wrestled one." I forced my lips into something resembling a smile, praying the stage lights hid the telltale flush staining my neck and chest. "Just tired," I stammered, my voice husky, unfamiliar. "Long rehearsal." Gwen's gaze flickered past me, towards the direction Julian had disappeared, then back to my face. A knowing look dawned in her eyes, mixed with something else. Caution, perhaps pity. She didn't push. "Yeah," she said softly. "It was intense. Especially your Giselle. Found some new depths today." She gave a small, non-committal shrug. "Shower?" "Yes," I practically croaked, desperate for the anonymity of the dressing room, the scalding spray of the water. Maybe I could wash away the lingering tension, the confusing mix of emotions. But as I gathered my things, my hand brushing against the worn canvas of my dance bag, I knew it was futile. The encounter hadn't just happened to me. It had happened within me. Julian hadn't just spoken to me. He had unlocked something dark and unfamiliar inside me. The fire he spoke of wasn't just his perception. It was real, licking at the edges of my control, threatening to burn away everything I thought I was. His parting words echoed in my mind, a counterpoint to the fading strains of Giselle's haunting score. "Ours is just beginning." It wasn't just a promise or a threat. It felt like a prophecy. And the most terrifying part? Beneath the fear, beneath the confusion, a treacherous pulse of anticipation beat a frantic rhythm, eager for the next act in this dangerous duet. The waiting hadn't ended. It had merely transformed into something far more consuming, far more perilous. The silence from the blackmailer seemed almost trivial now, compared to the storm Julian had unleashed within the theater of my soul. The click of the latch as I pushed the door shut echoed in the sudden, suffocating silence of my dressing room. I stood frozen for a long moment, listening to Gwen's footsteps recede down the corridor, mingling with the dwindling sounds of other dancers calling out goodbyes, locker doors slamming shut, the lifeblood of the theater draining away for the night. My breath hitched on a shaky inhale, my skin still prickled with awareness, my mind racing with confusion and unexpected longing. The intimate space of my dressing room felt violated, charged with the lingering energy of Julian's presence. His scent, sandalwood, musk, power, seemed to cling to the air, an invisible reminder of his intensity, his claim. I sank onto the small chair, my gaze landing on my dance bag. Inside, buried beneath point shoes and leg warmers, lay my burner phone. Silent. Still, accusingly, terrifyingly silent. Friday was ending. The deadline the blackmailer had implicitly set with their last communication today was bleeding away into the twilight, filtering through the high, dusty window near the ceiling. And nothing. With trembling fingers, I retrieved the phone. The screen remained dark. No missed calls. No new messages. No demands. No threats. Just silence. Julian's silence. The silence he had promised. The silence he had apparently bought and paid for with an astronomical sum that felt heavier than lead in my soul. Relief warred violently with a deep, coiling unease. Part of me wanted to collapse with gratitude, to believe it was over, that Julian had handled it, neutralized the threat completely, that his power, his reach, was absolute, that the money had bought not just my freedom from exposure, but genuine peace. But the relief felt thin, fragile. This silence didn't feel like peace. It felt deliberate, calculated, like the unnerving stillness before an earthquake, or the predatory pause before a strike. Was the blackmailer truly silenced? Or had Julian simply contained them? Postponed the inevitable? Was this reprieve merely a temporary stay, granted by my benefactor, a stay that could be revoked at his whim? The thought sent a fresh wave of cold dread washing over me. Or was this silence something else entirely? A new phase of the torment, orchestrated by the blackmailer themselves, designed to let the fear fester, to let the uncertainty eat away at me. What did it mean? What happened next? The unanswered questions hammered at me, leaving me more afraid, perhaps, than an outright demand would have. Slowly, mechanically, I finished shedding the remnants of the performance and the long day. Peeling off the sweat-dampened leotard and leggings felt like trying to slough off the demanding persona of the principal dancer I'd inhabited for hours. The exhausting energy of rehearsal and vigilance still clung to me, separate from my deeper, personal turmoil. I ducked into my dressing room's personal shower, a hard-won perk of principal status, for a quick, almost scalding rinse, hoping the water could somehow wash away the grime of the day. The hours of physical exertion, the lingering tension from the tech rehearsal, the unsettling memory of Julian's gaze watching me. Toweling off quickly, the rough terry cloth abrasive against my still prickling skin, I pulled on my own soft jeans and sweater. The familiar clothes felt like trying to reassume a self that no longer quite fit after the day's chaos. I sank onto the stool before the vanity and began scrubbing the heavy stage makeup from my face, staring at my reflection in the brightly lit mirror. Wide, haunted eyes stared back, pupils still slightly dilated. My lips felt sensitive from being chewed during moments of stress, my skin hyper-aware of even the soft brush of the cotton pad. I gathered my belongings, shoving everything haphazardly into my bag. As I did, the full weight of my situation settled upon me, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't just one thread anymore. It was a tangled, sticky web. The Blackmailer, a shadowy spider lurking just out of sight, holding the power to destroy my career with a single email, a single leaked photo or video. Julian, my savior and captor, the source of both my reprieve and this terrifying, consuming awareness that threatened my carefully guarded control. His investment felt like ownership, his presence both a comfort and a brand. And beneath it all, the dark, messy secret of the nocturne, the night my own recklessness might have given him, or others, leverage I couldn't comprehend. These threads pulled me in opposing directions, tightening, threatening to tear me apart. My career, my reputation, my sense of self, everything I had fought so hard to build felt balanced on a knife's edge. The stakes were impossibly high. Exposure didn't just mean embarrassment. It meant ruin. Complete, utter devastation. And I was entangled with a man whose power was as intoxicating as it was terrifying. A man who now knew just how easily I could unravel. Duro. I stepped out into the corridor. It was dimmer now, the main overhead lights extinguished, leaving only the intermittent safety lighting and the ethereal glow spilling from the stage, where the single ghost light stood sentinel. My footsteps echoed eerily in the sudden emptiness. The familiar backstage area, usually bustling with life, felt vast and hollow. Instead of heading directly for the stage door, I found myself drawn towards the stage itself. I walked through the wings, the towering flats casting long, distorted shadows, and stepped out onto the immense darkened stage. The ghost light cast a small pool of illumination center stage, leaving the rest in deep shadow, including the cavernous auditorium beyond. Standing there alone, where just a short time before I had danced under Julian's intense gaze, where I had embodied Giselle's haunting sorrow and her desperate, enduring love, I felt profoundly isolated. The theater, my lifelong happy place, suddenly felt alien, imbued with the tension and secrets of the day. It offered no comfort, only a vast, echoing emptiness that mirrored the uncertainty within me. Finally, I turned and made my way towards the exit, pushing through the heavy stage door out into the cool night air. The city sounds, traffic, distant sirens, muted conversations from passers-by were a jarring contrast to the theater's charged silence. I checked my phones one last time. Still nothing. The Blackmailer remained silent. Julian remained silent. Friday was over. But I couldn't shake the profound sense of foreboding. This silence wasn't an ending. It felt like a pause, a held breath before the plunge. The Blackmailer was out there, somewhere, biding their time, regrouping, or simply waiting for instructions from the man who now pulled my strings. And Julian. The memory of his words, his intense gaze, the electric tension between us, sent a tremor through me that had nothing to do with the evening chill. Those moments were intoxicating, a glimpse of something powerful that momentarily burned away the fear. But they weren't an escape. They were just another layer of complication, another strand in the web tightening around me. Each look, each shared moment, each surrender to that dangerous connection only heightened the stakes, binding me closer to a man whose motives remained shrouded, increasing the potential for everything I valued to shatter spectacularly. This wasn't over. I felt it deep in my bones, a certainty colder and more absolute than any fear I'd felt before. Friday had ended, but the true darkness I suspected was only just beginning to gather. The worst was yet to come. I could feel it approaching, silent and inevitable, carried on the winds of unanswered questions and forbidden desires.